And good evening and welcome to City Focus. I'm Marty Olsen, your host, and I'm delighted to have my good friend and yours back in the studio, Mike McLaughlin. So Mike, welcome back.
It's good to have a friend as important as you, Marty. Okay.
And I thought it'd be most appropriate to have you in tonight as school opens up in New London next week.
Yep.
And being the educator you are and the voice of local Southeastern Connecticut sports and
41st year.
High school football season opening up, that would be
7th, because some people play Thursday, so really the 8th.
That we can have an engaging conversation about the opening up of fall and school and high school football.
Oh, what a great thing. And I'm honored and privileged to be with a Hall of Famer from New London. Okay, people don't realize, and what we'll do, and he's got a few things to do, is we're going to talk about some of these players, and he's in the Hall of Fame, Mr. Olsen, with most of them. So when you ever think about how good did Marty play, he's in the Hall of Fame with some of these guys.
Well, I'm humbled to be associated with such great men.
Yep.
But New London's got an interesting schedule this year, and they got a new coach, Mr. Sanchez, who they brought in.
He's been on your show.
He has been, and he's bringing a level of, I think, excitement and enthusiasm and energy that I'm hoping will translate into his squad. And he's got some new people on his staff, as well as some holdovers from prior teams, and I think it's a good mix, and I think that we should see a much more positive outcomes this season than we have the last handful.
First of all, that's really good. There was a time at the end of last year, unfortunately, they had to play Saturdays. Now, okay, as I looked at schedule, which you're going to give in a minute, there are Friday night games, which is an enthusiastic thing in New London. New London has a crowd. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's not as good, but it's when you're winning, that's the place to be.
Yep. Well, they open on the road a week from Friday, on the 8th of September in Stratford, and that's an unusual matchup for them. I don't recall. I think they've played in Stratford, but for a state title game. But,
they played Stratford at.
Was that at UConn?
No, it was at Hand High, right down on the water, and what was his name? He came up to me. He's one of the greatest
players. That's a cold game that was brutally cold.
0, and New London had to wear sneakers. And the guy come up to me, and I can't remember his name. He was a great player for New London. His son played a lot at Montville, okay, and he come up and says, Mr. McLaughlin, don't worry about today's game. He says, because no team from Stratford ever beat a team from New London with sneakers on. And I'll think of his name after. But he was the guy that unfortunately couldn't play in one other book because he didn't build something in his class there where you had to build it. I forget what they called it then. But he was a tremendous football player. And he played basketball, he played football, he was a tremendous player. And I'll remember his name because he'll be killing me if I don't. He'll be calling me.
But that's, like I say, an interesting opener for the Whalers, and then week 2 they get the Falcons coming over the bridge from Groton, and so we get Fitch in week 2 at home. And even though this has changed a long time ago, I still have a hard time wrapping my head around New London and Fitch not playing on Thanksgiving. It just
have they ever played this early in the season? I mean, I
think they have, but it's different.
Well, there'll be something new in this game, and we're going to tell people first. I had talked to Mr. Orby, and I have talked to Mr. Romano, and the player of the game for Fitch and the player of the game from New London will get a MVP plaque that I'm just setting up to do the sponsorship. And I'm not, Jack O'Keefe, I'm not going to mention his business because then I'd give him a sponsor, but Jack O'Keefe is setting the plaques up, and I'm going to pick them up, and they'll be presented that game.
That sounds terrific.
Yep.
And then they have another home game in week 3. They host E.O. Smith coming down from Stores, and I don't recall New London ever playing E.O. Smith.
I don't think in anything, okay? Because E.O. Smith, like I said, you can't get any closer to UConn than they are.
Well, they're on campus.
Yeah, and I don't think we've ever played them. Maybe a basketball game we might have.
Well, we did swimming years ago, but
Yeah.
I mean, it was not a football, basketball, baseball rivalry by any means. And then heading on the road up to Hartford Weaver. And Weaver is, at least in football, competing in the ECC. And that was something that was confirmed when I had Jimmy Bunicor in here
Yes.
A few weeks ago.
Well, I remember when I went to higght school back when the dinosaurs were on the face of the earth. New London used to play Weaver, Hartford Public, all those schools, because we were in the Capital District Conference. And Weaver had a guy named Johnny Lee, okay, who made all-state football, basketball, baseball. He was an unbelievable athlete, and it was like the only part about going to play Weaver you liked was you could stop at that hot dog place in Hartford.
Augies and Ray's.
Yeah, Augie
East
and
Hartford.
in East Hartford, right by where the UConn football field is now. And that was it, because you weren't going to beat anybody.
Memories, that's for sure. And then we come we go over to East Lyme, and so we have a more traditional ECC foe here on the road.
Yep.
And that's actually the second of 4 straight road games. I mean, Weaver's on the road, East Lyme's on the road, and these are all, I might add, Friday night games.
Yeah, Stratford was on the road too.
Yep.
And-
And that's on the road, but Friday night. And then they play Woodstock Academy. That's a Saturday morning game.
Yeah, because Woodstock doesn't play any nights or anything, so they play in the morning, because they have this whole thing. But to go back to East Lyme, and I hope, if you haven't had them on, I hope you have them on. And we may be doing the East Lyme game for the radio station. I do it the first Friday. I'll mention your athletic director. He's come from Killingly, where they had all that success. Great guy to have on. I'll mention that if you call him to come on.
Yep. And then we end that 4-game road trip going to Bridgeport and playing Bassick. And again, I don't recall us ever having a game with Bassick.
The only
So this is
school,
an interesting schedule.
only school I remember us playing from Bridgeport was Warren Harding. When John Delagrange looked at Warren Harding, and they had all of these different guys who were going to play in the pros and stuff like that, and New London beat them with Coach Pinella, the late, and Jimmy O'Neill were the coaches, and John Delagrange had the game of his lifetime, the state championship basketball game, and Warren Harding was loaded. They had a guy averaging 50 points a game, and his son now plays in the NBA, and they had another guy went to Boston College, the guy went to UConn, and New London had John Delagrange and one of the Foys, and they were unbelievable that game.
Yeah. And Johnny Delagrange, now he lives in the Philippines.
Good for him. He's probably one of the tallest guys there.
He's a big guy. And then we close the season with 3 home games with Wyndham, who should be a good test,
They were Wade State tournament last year and went a long way.
and also Killingly.
Who has won as many as you can win.
And then we close with an NFA at home with on Thanksgiving.
That's great that it's home, because I remember the guy who played football. He was an NFA guy. He was a big guy, 6'6". He was a lineman. He played for the pros, for Wisconsin in the pros for a number of years. And the game, he was a senior, was cold and snowy, so it was at New London. They put him at quarterback for that game, and he's an unbelievable player. So, but that, and it's good that they're playing the schedule. It's good they're playing Friday nights. It's good that they have all of these different things coming. I wish the guy nothing but luck, because I've had a little small relationship with Valley Regional about 30 years ago, but maybe 40 years ago. But anyhow, so I know that they can play some sports, and they've been good for it. So I hope he gets it done, okay? But I think he doesn't have a problem. I think it's how one motivates the kids to get, and he's very motivated in himself.
Aaron.
Yeah. So who's this?
And I'm excited. I think that Coach Sanchez is going to bring a new level of enthusiasm and excitement, and I hope he brings some of the fans back. I mean, I went to a couple of games last year where the attendance was sparse, to be charitable.
What was it, last year or the year before when they honored Jimmy Bunico?
Last year.
Yeah, I mean, the crowd was. But this year, they'll be giving trophies in his name for the MVP for Fitch and the MVP for New London.
Yeah.
So, I mean, they're plaques. Jack O'Keefe loves to make plaques. I don't know why. So we go there.
Now, are you going to be doing radio this year?
Yes.
Every week?
41st year. Hopefully, I'll be at the New London Fitch game on that day so we can do something. But if not, I think we open with East Lyme this coming Friday, not Friday this week, but next week. And, whenever you're there, you are automatically the halftime guest. Because whoever else is, I'll throw off, because usually we'll have, And it'll be very interesting. This should be a good year for football around here. But, it just seems like with all the teams we have here, and rumor has it, and I don't have any proof of this, ECC is going to 2 divisions rather than 3, because they finally have moved Killingly up to the top division. With all of the teams we have around here, why does the school have to play Bassick? Okay, and
I think that this is
Stratford.
part of the scheduling that's been put together. We've got a working relationship with the conference down on that part of the state. And
yeah, but if you want to put people in here, who's going to go more? If New London plays Waterford, which they don't this year. Okay?
we don't play Ledger either.
Yeah. What about these 2 games? You're going to put people, because people from both teams are going to go to those games. Who's coming down from Wyndham or Killingly? Not the big numbers that they would have if they had Ledger with them. And, is it a good contest? Yes. Is Killingly good? Yes. Is Wyndham good? Does New London have the potential to be better than they were? Yeah. They're better than a 2-win team. So let's see what happens.
Yeah. Well, I think to open on the road against a non-traditional foe, it's going to make it difficult to get the fan base enthused to do a road trip.
Yeah. What if
a handful of years ago, when Ron Roman was the coach, I went down to see the Whalers in New Haven play Hill House.
Yep.
Hill House across, but they beat the bejesus out of them that
Yeah.
night. It was, but there was a good turnout from New London that went down to New Haven.
Mm-hmm. They're probably going to Pepe's after.
But Juan had good squads.
Yeah. Well, what? See, how do I say that? Juan's teams played a certain way. Okay, they tried to emulate and imitate how he played. And he was as hard-nosed a guy as it was. I always think of Juan Roman, and I would like to call him my friend because he's a very nice guy. We know, is that how Central Connecticut gave him the shaft. Because he went to Norwich the same year as Jackie Cochran for a half a season and left, when he got to be his 4th year at Central, he was the captain, and they said, no, you can't play. That done it, but Juan Roman kept his cool. Has 2 boys that went to Yale. He had a girl who going to Fordham, unless I'm incorrect.
She's all done now. It's amazing. Time flies when you're
So
having
Juan's
fun.
that old, huh? But that's the thing. But he was a great player, and he played on that team in 1983 that won the first state championship for New London. Because I remember that was the first year I announced games, and they gave up 32 points the whole year, and the first team probably gave up 1 touchdown. Because they played a team from Torrington who stayed at UConn the night before. Oh, we're going to kill New London, and they're still looking to score. That's how good Juan was. And they had Jackie Cochran. They had Danny Vendetto. Okay, was the quarter. Danny, not Scott. Danny Vendetto. And they had one of the Potter brothers, who was their kicker, kicked a state record for state final field goal up at UConn. It was unbelievable team
Up
that
at
they had.
Memorial Stadium on campus.
Yes,
Yeah, and that ballpark doesn't exist anymore. It's been taken down.
could be.
Well, I'm not asking. I mean, that's a fact. They've
Yeah.
taken it down. They got the rent, so they don't need that facility anymore. But
Yeah.
too bad.
But you know something? That was a great place to see a game, and probably more people went to that place and go to the rec. I mean, the rent down there in Rensselaer Field, because it just hasn't caught on yet. But I'll tell you what, UConn, with the new coach, Mora, who's a very good coach, had their whole season on the line tomorrow night. Because if they ever beat North Carolina State, they could be very, very good. But if they get creamed by North Carolina State, nobody's going to go anymore. And that's the thing, because I think the newspapers don't believe it. They're a number of point underdog. Okay.
Well, that's to be understandable. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't think that even though they made a bowl game last year,
Yeah.
they were a 500 squad. That
Yeah.
they're still have to
But
prove themselves.
They got some transfers like that can play, and that's the situation. Because when I was in New Orleans, I went to the Superdome down there. Unbelievable place to see a game. I mean, you just can't imagine what it's like. It's so condensed in there. They have 70,000 people, and it's air conditioned, and what a game. And the amazing thing is, the night after I left, Taylor Swift sold it out, 68,000 people. And that's the thing. But when you talk about New London, I love to talk about New London football, and a lot of things people don't understand, okay, about New London football is number one, and please call us, because if we leave a guy out, and the guy was a great guy of what we're going to do in a minute, don't blame us, because I'm not that smart. I can remember everybody, okay? But I mean, but Marty, we start with, is a Hall of Famer. Now, you can't imagine what it's like to be a Hall of Fame football player at New London, because we're going to name a number of guys, and 10, 12, 15 of them play pro football. And that's how good this thing was. I mean, I'll start, and we'll go. He didn't go to London High School, but they named the field after him, okay? So we'll call him as one of the London guys, Pat Canamella.
Yep, well, he's before my time. But
He went to Southern Cal, which is about as good of a... And when they said, we're going to name this field Pat Canamella Field, Frank Gifford, who was his roommate at Southern Cal and a great player for the Giants, and came down and gave the speech. That's how important Pat Canamella was. Okay, because I don't think Frank Gifford knew where New London was because they had no casinos, and not that he was a gambler, but I'm saying they didn't have any of that prestige. He came down and made that speech. And guess who played in the game for Waterford? Lee Elsey, whose show you're on tomorrow.
Yep, for those who are interested, I'll be on Lee's program tomorrow morning, 6:30, 94.9 FM on your dial.
Oh, that show, because, he just is marvelous, that he can do this stuff and talk to anybody of any type of situation, okay, on things other than sports. My favorite Lee Elsey story, and I probably told it, is, and we'll get to these players because we got some time. Lee Elsey was just starting his show, and the Norwich Navigators were part of the Yankees. And they were having a Hall of Fame home run hitting contest. Dave Winfield, Johnny Bench.
Norwich that year hosted the Eastern League
Yep.
All-Star game.
Yes.
All right, the Eastern League played another league's
Yeah.
All-Star, and then they had that home run
And Dave Winfield.
home run derby.
And Dave Winfield, okay? And others, okay?
Many, yeah.
And Lee says, can you get me in the contest because I want to promote the show? I said, sure. Because he gets in, and who's leading at the end of the first round?
Lee Elsey.
And they say to him, I think you better sit down for a while. Cause,
You can't win.
You can't win. But Lee could play. He played in Europe. He played at all kinds of places. He played a couple of colleges. If he had been drafted by anybody but the St. Louis Cardinals, who were a speed team, he would have probably played some Major League Baseball.
Well, I think he got to AAA.
Yeah.
I mean, he was a good ball player.
But he's much further than AAA on this show he does. It's unbelievable. The people in the interviews, every big politician that you can think of. And plus, his interest level in Long Island is huge. that people are listening, coming over the casinos are there because the station goes out that way. So I can only say to Lee, I'll be listening tomorrow at 6:30 because I'll tell you what, you and him will have some good things. I get a big kick when he has Ficini on, okay, and you and him don't always talk about sports. You talk about other things. He actually talks about some political situations with
Well,
you.
I think he brings me on primarily to discuss New London, but I often will
Yeah.
mention that New London sports, how the high school's doing. As a matter of fact, last week I was invited by Coach Millsaps to
Yes.
the banquet that they had for the New London High School girls state championship team.
Yes. And they put the posters up.
And that was a marvelous evening, and I was grateful
Yeah.
to be asked to attend.
Well, I'll tell you what is really amazing. This year, the day does the games they do on the TV or whatever you call it, and it only lists Casey O'Neill as doing the games. The first game Casey O'Neill ever did was me, and we didn't have rosters. I did many games with Jimmy. Jimmy O'Neill was an unbelievable AD, do things, American Legion coach, everything like that, and kind of a unique individual, good golfer too. And I'll tell you what, Casey, if you got no one to do the games with you, okay, I'll be glad to do all the games with you that the New London thing is going to put on. Because I know, I don't know what the deal is, but I'll make the offer now. If you guys want me, just call me, and I'll be glad to do that. I don't know who I'm hooked up with for what, but I would love to do games with Casey O'Neill again because he's very good at it, okay? And see, he was the color man, but now he's the play-by-play, so it's really neat doing the things with him. So, but whatever, that's another thing. But I mean, I just wanted to plug him because he's done such a wonderful thing with that. And his father is well known. His father's probably as well known as anybody. Some people can't stand him because he used to beat him in American Legion each and every year there was. And
He
but
built
was
up a powerhouse in New London.
Oh,
and New
he
London
went to
Legion
Holy Cross. He was, you know what I mean? He did everything you could think of. When Holy Cross was the school where the guy that's on the United States Supreme Court went to Holy Cross. But let's look at some of these guys.
Well, but you know what? I mean, New London High goes back to 1951,
Yes.
which is a little bit before my time.
Yeah.
But one of the first players out of New London High was kind of a little guy, but tough, gritty.
Played in Alabama, not Alabama University, but he played in Alabama for college.
That's correct, and they played semi-pro ball in Providence.
Oh yes, he did steamrollers.
And that was Coach Jimmy Bunicore.
Senior.
That's
As
correct.
opposed to, yeah.
And he was coming out
Well-
of that first group of classes of New London High School.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons that, and he coached at Fitch. So he coached at Fitch, he coached in London. That's why they're giving the plaques in his name for the MVPs of the game. But he was a very talented individual as a running back. Not very big at all, maybe 5'8" max, and maybe 175 pounds. But he'd tackle you, he'd run the ball, he did everything. And that's the thing, because when New London first started, people don't remember that it used to be where the Williams School was a girls' school for New London. The boys went to Buckley, which is now, I
The
forget.
Regional Multicultural Magnet School.
And the people who wanted to pursue a trade or something went to Chapman Tech.
Yeah. Well, Buckley, my father went to Tech,
Yeah.
as did my uncle. But I mean, in terms of a stereotype, I mean, the Buckley boys were,
Oh, yeah.
and Buckley was an all-boys school,
Yes, it was.
was geared primarily for guys that were gearing up to go to college.
Yep.
And as you noted, Tech was a tech school. I mean, you go to work in the trades, and it was a co-ed school.
Yeah. But I mean, and Williams, where the girls went, had the same concept that Buckley had. I mean, New London High School doesn't have New London High School until 1951. And, but I'm amazed that, and one of the things I did this year for the rec department was they had an enrichment program. And I had like 70 kids all at different times. and trying to teach him the history of New London. And I'll tell you what, the hardest sell was who Nathan Hale was, even though schools are, who John Winthrop Jr. was, and who Colonel Legend was. Because, no, but you know what I mean? And those are three of the more prominent people that ever came from New London and there and so forth. And
I got a heavy dose of that stuff in grammar school. I think
Yeah.
fourth grade at Harbor School, we
well, Harbor School with Stanley F. Hall was quite a bit different than actually it's closed now, so it's got to be a bit different. But we won't talk about the school system because what happens is very simply is many of the kids who go to the school system did not originate in New London. They came here. So it's an understandable situation. But, you know, when you think about New London, when you think about the football team, you think about quarterbacks, you know what I mean? And one of the kid who went to high school with me was Dave Connors.
Yeah.
Dave Connors was as good a football quarterback as you could have. He was a very good player. He made one mistake. He went to Purdue the same time Bob Greasy went there. So that wasn't good. Then he transferred to Wake Forest, and he had another guy, Freddie Summers, who later played for the Browns. So he made, you know, he just, and that was when you didn't get into the transfer portal and you didn't go to, they had you transferred.
Well, if you transferred, you sat out of here too.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, he had some pretty tough luck, but I mean, he was a terrific high school quarterback. And to get recruited to play in the Big Ten speaks volumes.
Yeah, I mean, Purdue, I mean, he was, and, you know, and he was just, and he was a decent baseball player, but the big joke was he was a catcher, and Johnny Ellis, a major league player, had to wait a year if he come to catch you there. And, you know, and he played some basketball, but basketball wasn't, but he was a football player. He was an unbelievable football player. And, you know, and then you look and you see that they had John Brennan, who for the 68 team, you kidding? You know, John Brennan probably should have played offensive tackle, but he was the best.
He's a big guy, but that whole team, the 68 team, and that was kind of
that was
when
the
I
team.
when I was cutting my teeth. I mean, I was a freshman that year, and they arguably had the best New London squad. I mean, there's been some other terrific squads, but they hammered the hell out of everybody except Norwich.
Yes.
Norwich, they had to go up there and play, and
37-34.
And I didn't. That was one game I did not see because I had gone to New York to see my brother compete at Yankee Stadium at a Giants game with that punt, pass, and kick competition.
Yeah.
On his way to winning the national championship.
The 68 team should have been the #1 team in the state. They didn't play state playoffs then. They only beat NFA 37-34. Okay, and then. So one of the New Haven picked.
Well, the New Haven Register had they had their own poll, and that was kind of the.
And then one of the West Haven teams in New Haven, or somebody beat somebody else 70-20 at Thanksgiving, and they got one. New London got two. I would have loved to have seen New London play that team. You know what I mean? And but he was very good. One of the other guys is Timmy Lewis. Timmy Lewis went to Holy Cross. He just had a way about him of moving the football. I mean, he was a very, very talented, gifted player. He was good. Michael Foy was a very, very talented quarterback who played later, I think, played at Trinity or something like that. And he was exceptional. Johnny McCullough, who beat Aunt Sonia in the state championship game. Of course, he found Troy McKelvin 14 times in that game for passes, but Johnny McCullough was an excellent guy, you know what I mean? And these quarterbacks that they've had, but one of the more unique guys who was quarterback was Timmy Reardon, who played pro quarterback, but never played a down as a quarterback in New London.
Yeah, well, Reardon went to Temple.
Yes, he did.
And he played quarterback at Temple, and he played in the USFL for the Philadelphia Stars.
Yes, he did. And I think he played a little bit as a tail end on the taxi squad for the Philadelphia Eagles.
Yeah, but he had that tie in with the school. I mean, the city and the school, because Temple's down in Philadelphia.
Yeah.
And then you had the, is it David Reed, who played.
Stephon Reed was the quarterback.
He it was fun to watch him play because he ended up going to Florida, where they converted him to a tight end.
Yeah, as big as he was, he's a huge kid.
But I mean, watching him play high school ball gave you an idea of how good you have to be to be playing top level D1 ball.
Oh yeah, I mean,
there's a reason why some guys are playing where they are. I mean, but he was going to a ranked university.
But one of the more unique players that I saw play at the earliest level when I was a kid was Billy Discordia. Billy Discordia could play some quarterback. He was in the maybe early 60s.
Yep.
He threw a ball once to one of the fastest guys in London ever had, named Fred Fabricant. And Fred didn't even get a chance to turn around and ball him in the back of the helmet. That's how far he threw the ball. But Billy Discordia was a very, very good quarterback. And, and we're going to find some of these guys that is amazing, and I was thinking about it when I put together part of the list, is a lot of these guys who did not go to college as college players became policemen in London.
Yeah, well, Billy certainly is one of them.
Yeah. Phil Julian, another one. Okay, and there's a number of them that did. And so it's a situation where New London has had more than their share of quarterbacks. I mean, they've had guys play each and every other way. But, the place that I think, or the position that I think stands out in New London, is linebacker. Because when you get to linebacker, there should be 3 linebackers, and there's only ever 4 ever named. But please, call us. I never ask for a call on these shows. But in case we forget one of the guys. Okay?
And we probably will.
Yeah, and that's not our fault if you don't call us. 4 linebackers that you could really think about. John Green, who was a baseball wrestler and thing, but he'd be number 4. Because the top 3, beyond a doubt, are Mad Dog Holloway, who I swear would chase you into the stands to tackle you. And he was maybe 150 pounds, okay? Juan Roman, who you weren't getting in the end zone when he played, and Tommy Major, who would have been a pro player if he didn't hurt his knee at Maryland Eastern Shore. You take those 4. Tommy Thompson also played.
Well, you just took the words out of my mouth. I mean, Tommy Thompson was a tough nut, too.
Yeah, and he played, too. But, I mean, that position there is they always had guys, okay? You wanted to play linebacker in London, you better knock somebody down. You better hit somebody. And I don't care if you were a superstar, whatever it is, you weren't running against New London. And they were good, okay? And when you talk about those guys, they're just unbelievable. I mean, running backs, yeah. You want to rank them? Ambrose Fletcher. How much did he play for Penn State? Set every record that there was, okay? Great running back, okay? Juan Madry, as slippery as you could be. What a pleasure he used to be. Big Ernie Douglas, okay?
Yeah.
He was like a truck running up through the things. He was a very, very good running back. And obviously, and I always forget his name, the Reverend Hyslop's grandson was a great player too. So Reverend Hyslop, if you're listening for you hate me, call me and tell me his name, because he had an Irish type name, it was McNamara McKinney or something like that. McKinnon. Yes, it was. And he was, oh God, did he go on and play in the football. And you had Ernie, you got Ambrose, and like I said, Jamal Johnson, okay? I mean, he was about as good as you want to be.
And Billy Butchka going back a day
yes,
or two?
He's the other one I had on the list. Billy Butchka. New London, when he was a senior, didn't have a quarterback that wasn't injured. The last 3 games, they played single wing, and he was the tailback. And Billy Butchka was another person who went into the police. Not New London police, but he went into FBI or something like that, yeah. Because I remember his father used to teach at Buckley Junior High when Buckley Junior High School became. And his father was
a referee.
Yeah, and his father was a great football player in New England college football levels. And you already asked him a question. He says, well, you'd have to ask a biologist that, or you'd have to ask this. But Mr. Butchka, I think Joseph was his name, was a great, you know what I mean? But Billy Butchka was unbelievable, too. And Jamal Johnson, I mean, I can remember Jamal Johnson playing against Leo Ficini when he came down with East Catholic. Leo Ficini's team, Leo Ficini wasn't playing. And Leo had been undefeated for like 2 seasons, and they come into New London, and Jamal kicks the extra point. He never ever kicked an extra point. He scores a touchdown, kicks extra point, and New London wins 7-6. And that's the thing. But I mean, they were extremely great players. And you know, and linemen, God.
Well, one guy that we didn't mention before we came on the air, but he played for the Giants.
John Contoulis.
John Contoulis.
Yes. I mean, what more can you do than that? And you've got Bobby Martin, who was a judge. He was unbelievable player.
I played with Dane Sebastian.
Yeah, Richie Foy.
Well, Richie Foy on the offensive line. And Richie went to UConn, was All-American at Connecticut.
Yes, he was. He was a tremendously good player. And you know, when you had all of the other guys, you know, like Murray A. Winston and all the other guys that played like the tackle and stuff like that, who were not as known as these guys. Because Bobby Martin, the late Judge Martin, he really thought he was Sam Huff because they gave him number 70. Besides being a center, he tackled you all over the field as a linebacker. And he was a very unique guy. And but the linemen they've always had, they've had linemen as long as you can ever remember.
Yeah, I played with Charlie Alter, who was a tough guy
yes.
on the defensive line.
And Louis Mallett.
Louis Mallett.
Who was
Marvin,
big? Is he the biggest?
Key.
Louis Mallett, biggest guy ever played for the London? He got to be 3+.
He was a big guy.
Yeah.
Billy Dahl was on that line too.
And these guys could play. I mean, it was a situation where New London has had all of these different guys. And there was, you know, New London has had a great success in football.
Tony Basilica, his brother Rocco.
Oh, Rocco. Tony played for Bill Belichick up at Wesleyan. Tony always gets mad at me because there's a guy, oh God, he puts on all of these youth programs for New London. He was a nose guard at St. Bernard's. Oh, and I'm trying to think of what his name was. And they played at about the same time, no, you know what I mean? And they were, both of them were unbelievably good players. And Tony was always says, I'm better. But Tony was extremely good, and a lawyer, different situation along that line.
Yeah.
So, you know, you have all of these guys. Defensively, I always remember Phil Julerine. Oh, man, he was a older player. He'd knock you down so fast you could, you know what I mean? Nick Petrosani came here. Nick Petrosani scored some touchdowns, but he had to work every minute a thing to get by Phil Julerine. And Phil Julerine, okay, was the one in New London really liked the 2-point conversion. They gave him the ball as a running back, and he was in there. So he was extremely talented. And, you know, when you think about all of these different guys, like we say, Louis Mallett, your Alters, you know what I mean? And all of the different players like that, they had such good players. Wide receivers, you talk about.
Yeah, but I mean, again, we're going back 50 years. I mean, Reg Wheeler, Kevin Booth was on the.
Kevin Booth went there in the '68 team, Reggie Wheeler. Then you had Billy McCarthy, who decided to play football 1 year, okay? And he was a senior when Connors was, and he scored like 14, and got a full scholarship football at the University of North Carolina.
But he was a baseball player. He
Yes,
was a pitcher, wasn't he?
great baseball, and a 1,000-point basketball player, okay? And then you had Greg Albright, who caught 13 touchdown passes in 1 year. He was a very good wide receiver. I mean, and, you know, you had Jimmy Lewis. Oh, Jimmy Lewis was a Kevin Booth, as you earlier alluded to. Yep. I mean, he was a fabulous wide. I mean, New London has had.
Roland Brooks.
Oh, yes. Reggie Eccleston.
God, Reggie was an All-American at Connecticut.
Yes, he was. He had a shot.
He had a look-see, I think, with the Patriots.
Yeah, had a look-see with him. And that's the thing. And then you just look, like I said, Kevin Booth, Tony Basilica, all these guys, not that they're wide receivers, but they just played and they played. But one of the guys who I always like to say, who was the clutch guy, was Troy McKelvin. Troy McKelvin caught 14 passes from Johnny McCullough, as I said before, in that state championship game where they beat Ansonia. And I remember that game vividly because not Ambrose, but his brother ran the kickoff back for a touchdown, and we weren't even on the air, so I had to recreate that.
That's Cassie.
Yeah, Cassie ran it.
Who works for the schools
Yes,
now.
he does. So what I would do in the London game, and Cassie was the AD or acting AD or whatever he was at the time, he came into the booth one time, and I said, Kazzy, I'll recreate the touchdown just to see what he did. But he was also a very good football player. And the guys that they've had, you know, you just think of all of these guys that played pro football and all of these guys that played, like I said, Johnny, but it all starts with Patty Cannamella, who they named the field after, and keeps on going down and down and down. And you think now, New London, maximum 50,000 people at one time. Now, maybe 27. Okay.
I think we maxed out. We were a World War II boom town.
Yeah.
In the mid-40s.
Yeah. Because you figure, but you think about this. You know what amazes me the most about New London is what town of 40,000 has within their vicinity to work? EB in New London and Groton, Pfizer in Groton, the Coast Guard Academy, 3 colleges, Connecticut College, Mitchell College, obviously Coast Guard Academy, and the Naval Submarine Base right up the road. Okay? I mean, think about how many towns of 40,000 have access to that?
Well, and we also had the Sound Lab.
Oh, yes, which I don't know why they moved it to Newport.
Well, I know where they did, but I mean,
Yeah.
you know, it was sad looking back at it through the prism of 2020.
Yeah.
How passive the community was allowing that to happen.
Oh, yeah.
That really was a devastating blow.
Well, that all came.
I mean, those were, you know, the place was loaded with engineers and. You
Yeah.
know,
Well, what about when they decided to put Pfizer in New London? And all the people who's had homes forever? Because I was talking to, maybe a month ago, Mr. Lonergan, who's the only lawyer, not Timmy, but Tommy, who won a case before the United States Supreme Court.
Yep.
And that was on the Little Pink House situation. Imagine how that used to be for them. And now what are they putting? Homes back there and things like that. But I mean, you know, it's a situation where our town has greatly changed. Okay? I mean, it's like has so many unique situations and so many unique things that have gone on. And, you know, and hopefully it'll come back to where it should be or do what it does, and all of these things that are being built will be built, or whatever happens.
Well, and that the new kids and the new players will develop their own identities and their own memories
Yes.
of. So when they're our age, sitting here,
Talking.
they'll have the pleasant memories that we can reminisce about in their community, and the guys that they played with, and the teams and the coaches, and
Yeah.
you know, the bond on a football team is special. I think it's different than
Because you
basketball
go through
or
different
baseball.
things. You're getting hurt. People being hurt. They're getting them up. You're picking them up. They're knocking them down. And I think what we have to transcend all of our athletics too, not that Miss Millsap needs any help from me, because she does but is what can they do for our community, not to our community.
Yeah. I mean, you know, a gentleman who just recently retired from basketball, Chop Parker.
Oh, yes, he's been on your show numerous times.
I played with Chop, we were classmates, but I mean, he also was a football player. He played
The
defensive
Hawk.
back.
They call him the
and
Hawk.
He was a tough guy in the defensive backfield, and there were Lancasters.
Oh, God.
You know, I mean, I played with Bobby and Spencer. Spencer was my classmate. Bobby a year behind.
And then how about them playing basketball, the Lancasters?
And
Michael.
then we also had a lot of Hadleys, Hadley
Yes,
family.
Ken yeah. Michael Hadley.
Michael and David Hadley.
Yeah, I mean,
and Billy, Vernon.
Yeah, I mean, it was like, you know, everybody who, I mean, the names of these guys, okay? If I were the new football coach of New London, okay, and he really is so talented, he doesn't need any help from me, but I would find as many of these old guys that I have and have a dinner somewhere, okay, maybe in the school cafeteria, and say to the kids that are playing now, here's this. That's like finding, you go into Greek and all the heroes come right out and the different things. Because, I mean, for people to understand what it was like for those guys to play, every when I went to high school, they only played NFA, because that was probably older, because there was no Montville, no Legend, there's none of the other stuff like that, and no East Lyme, and basically, and Fitch around here. And then you played Public, Weaver, Hillhouse, all those teams along that line.
Britain was a powerhouse in those
God.
years.
When I was a senior, we lost one game. Not we, I mean, I meant by the school year. I didn't play. We lost to New Britain 50-0. That was the only game we lost. But they had Tony Starwitz, who went on to play in the pros and everything else. And they would play you at 10 o'clock in the morning, where you'd be on that field, which is a beautiful field, okay? And there'd be steam coming out of their noses and stuff like that. So, but, you know, because I remember when Jackie Cochran coached there. I mean, New London has had some tremendous coaches. I mean, they've had Mr. Bunacourt. Oh, when he coached, he won 4 or 5 state championships. When people weren't winning them, okay, he won. He beat Ansonia. He split. Was 4 times he played Ansonia. He won twice. You know, he won the other games. He won. He beat the other team, Southeastern or whatever it is in the state. I mean, so he was an exceptional coach because he knew what it was like to be at New London. Jackie Cochran won some state championships. Knew what it was like to be at New London. Okay, the guy that coached the '68 team.
Bob Weiss.
Bob Weiss. Oh, gosh, oh, golly. For what reason you think when you say the name Bob Weiss is some big, huge guy? But, boy, he went over to Fitch and won over there when they played the first round of state championship games ever. Okay, he beat somebody in the first round. Fitch was.
Well, he had a running back name. I think it was Addison. Who was
Joe Addison. I thought he was Ray Charles when I first saw him. He had the sunglasses. Not that he was blind, but I mean he was. Because I interviewed him, and he was unbelievable, and he was a great player. But he also had the guys that almost threw the discus playing linebacker for him in the Olympics, Bill Borden, yes. And I mean, they had guys that could run the ball, play, and they were huge. And, you know, and he did the job in the London '68. We should have bet, and he went over to Fitch, you know what I mean? And he was Bobby Weiss was a great coach. He was a college coach.
Some of the guys, I mean, in the early days, Harlan Sturgis, you had Dom Guazzo.
Yeah, let's not
Palmer
forget.
Sibilia.
Yeah, let's not forget him. You talk about players. He played for Purdue also. And he played in the college all-star game at the Polo Grounds in New York. You know, so he could play. You know, and this is a different thing. You know, when you try to say it's like the tradition that these guys have for them in football is unbelievable. Jamal Johnson, All-State as a junior, Player of the Year in the state of Connecticut as a senior.
Well, Jamal made faces in the crowd in Sports Illustrated.
Sure. And Jamal, I mean, he could play. I mean, Jamal would.
And then another guy, you know, we can just keep running these names off, but I mean, who's still local is Anthony Chavon.
Oh yeah.
Big guy.
Yeah,
he was recruited Big Ten.
Yes.
And, ended up coming back home, but he was, again, good enough to be looked at.
I remember he played at tight end. Played a game against Fitch that was unbelievable. Caught a couple of touchdown passes and that thing. I think he started at St. Bernard's, then he came over to learn. But no, I mean, he went to a very good junior college, and he went to Iowa. Iowa, I think, was the place.
Yeah.
And, you know, and you're talking about Big Ten. At that time, now there's like, 20 teams in the Big Ten? Who knows? And, no, but...
The Big Ten was the Big Ten.
Yes, that's it. You played in that, you were somebody.
And then we've got the Roman brothers. I mean, Hunter and
Yale.
Major
How
at
much
Yale.
more can they do? And Ambrose Fletcher playing at Penn State, running the kickoff back in the Rose Bowl. I mean, and this is the thing, and this is what I wish, that somehow we could recreate the enthusiasm for the former players like we have who they are. Granted, we know them, and many of the kids, well, they might be related to them or their cousins or whatever it is like that, but to get a situation so they can rebuild that thing. If you want to rebuild, you rebuild from historically on, of who we used to have play, who used to be there, to tell the story. Well, I remember when your cousin did this and he scored this touchdown, or I remember when your father was down and out, picked himself up and ran 56 yards for the next touchdown. You know, I mean, Johnny Ellis played football from the London High School, and he was, you know, he came in from Michigan.
He was Johnny Ellis was a terrific running back.
Yes, he was.
And his brother Dave,
Yeah.
who I played with, he was a senior when I was a sophomore. He was a load at defensive end.
Oh yes, he went on to play,
a load.
become a Marine and everything. You know what I mean? But I mean,
Steve Carboni, another
oh yes,
big
you
guy.
talk about big guys. But I mean, when you talk about Johnny Ellis, he came here as a quarterback from the state of Michigan when his father retired, and he came back here because they had lived here before, and then he came back, and he was a quarterback, and then Dave Connors was always ahead of him, so he had to. We played running back and linebacker, like you say. He played someplace else in baseball other than catcher, which he later became. And but you know, I mean, and I'll say one thing about Johnny Ellis. I have 2 minutes, so I'll be quick. Johnny Ellis, one time, made a super mistake like all of us do. But when he did that thing at the Mohegan Sun, where he brought all the Yankees down for that dinner, so all the money went to people who had people with cancer that could not get to see them. I think Johnny Ellis redid his whole situation.
Well, listen, that foundation is still
Yes.
doing. That's an annual event.
Yes, and Johnny Ellis, when he would bring them there, and you'd see Whitey Ford, Mickey Mantle, Yogi Berra, you name it at the thing. And these were not some guys who might have played Yankees, Bill Skowron. These were the guys who played as the Yankees.
Yeah, no, that was a terrific event. But again, I mean, his widow is still has that going on.
And that is the most wonderful thing, because to me, Johnny Ellis was one of the most unique guys ever. And I appreciated. I knew his older brother Ricky. Okay, he had an older brother, you know, and they were just unbelievably things. And when you talk about John Ellis, anybody tries to tell me, I just say, look, how much money has he given to these people who now could see the parents, their cousins, or somebody in the last husband's wife? And that was the situation. He was a great athlete in London too. But it took Jim O'Neill to put him on an American Legion team, and he hit 4 home runs in the World Series. I mean, not the state championship American Legion tournament.
Yeah.
Next thing you know, everybody wanted him, because if you hit him on a Palmer field, you hit him out of everywhere. And he did. He's the last guy to ever hit 400 in the major leagues. He was batting .412 and he broke his ankle sliding into second base.
That was in April, though, I think.
Yeah, no, I'm saying, but he's still the last guy. His batting average at the end of the year was .412. But those are the things, and you know, and well, I'll tell you who else was. He never worked at Mr. G's, but Nick Giannakis played football at UConn. Okay, one of the boys, Pete, and the other one. You know, he was a big kid. He played football at UConn. He was a good football player. And guess what? They're telling us something.
They're telling us that it's time to shake hands, and until next time.
Come out fighting.
Mike, it's always a pleasure having you on. What a fun conversation tonight.
Yeah.
And for those folks that we didn't touch on, we'll get them next time.
Yep.
Folks, you've been watching City Focus. I'm Marty Olsen, your host. I've had Mike McLaughlin on, and we'll see you again next week. Good night.